So my question tonight that I want to get into is loving God, when I say that I love God, is loving God the same thing as trusting God? Or have you decided that, yeah, I really do love God? Like, I went through a long period of time where there wasn't a doubt that I loved God, but there was a huge doubt that I wanted God to be directly involved in my life, in my marriage, in what was going on with my family. I didn't think, in a lot of ways, it was any of God's business. What I did want God to do during that piece of my life was kind of function as a general contractor, where I could go, look, I need this bathroom redone. This is how I need it redone. This is what I need it to look like at the end. I don't want you to make any real mess. I want you to clean up after yourself and don't leave it a mess for the weekend, whatever. But that's really what I want. Like, I really want a contractor. That's the relationship I really had with God when I got into a major crisis in my life was I wanted him to function as a general contractor. I didn't want him to tell me what to design. I did not want God to tell me what I had to be willing to let go of. For heaven's sakes, no. I would have had no interest in God telling me anything about what you're going to hear in these next 3 steps. I would have been like, well, the first two steps, which we're going to talk about, they really were kind of A-okay because kind of like it was obviously happening in my life, like it happens in our lives, and kind of like no harm, no foul. Other people in your life have probably talked to you about, hey, is something going on? Are you okay? You seem different. You seem sadder. You seem more angry. You seem whatever. That part of the first 2 steps, people see. They see. They see it in you. The third step strips away, like it literally strips away anything that's not personal. Like, the first 2 steps, it's polite Christianese. You can roll it off your tongue. You can go, well, of course, like I'm willing to admit to God that like I'm powerless, or kind of like, why am I here? It's like, but the thing is, if you stop the show and you put up the little bubble, and the bubble person was God, and God was like, well, Mark, do you actually think that you're powerless over what's happening in front of you? Do you actually think that? Do you actually not believe that you can fix it, that you can change it, that you can make it right, that you can make it better? Do you not really think that? I would have debated that with God. I'd be like, no, God, like that's your job. If God would have pressed on, we would have gotten to the crux of the matter. And the crux of the matter would be like remodeling my house. Like, do I really want a person that's going to help me design this, that has really good ideas? Do I really want their ideas, or do I really want to contract with them to do what I say, to do it how I want it, to do it the way I want it, and to do it the way that I have it end, the way it ought to end, the way I want it to end? So I can go, that was all my vision. It's what I wanted to do. There was no real collaboration. I just hired a guy, and he did it. Well, how much of that is really, when you get down to it, our base relationship, our base impression with God? Like, we can roll off our tongue stuff like we admitted we were powerless over whatever, that our lives had become unmanageable. Well, people can see that your freaking life is unmanageable, right? Like, when it's at its worst, it's not hard to see. Like, you're missing work, you're late for appointments, you're showing up when you're not supposed to, you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to do, you're wrestling mightily with whatever's going on, you're unhappy, you're frustrated, you're angry, you're kind of a dead giveaway. People People aren't going to say in a lot of cases, well, man, I didn't know things were that bad. Like after a while, they're going to know. People also are going to assume if they're Christian, if they know something about God, they're going to assume that God ought to be involved as the general contractor of your life and mine in some kind of a way. They're going to assume that because, hey, what do I see in front of me? I'm looking at your life. You can't do it. Like you're not able to do it. You're not able to fix it. You can't make it right. You're not growing. You're not progressing. You're in a rut. You're in a hole. You're just stuck. So I can say, yeah, I need a power greater than me to restore me to sanity. Again, look at that step carefully. If you misconstrue it, it sounds like a contractor step, doesn't it? I need a contractor to come in and for the time being, do what? Restore my life to sanity, to a sane place. And now, the next piece of this, we get to the really hard shot. The really hard shot. The really sort of crux of the matter piece of this whole thing. We were in conversation, we're in about power. Me being powerless, part 3, step 3 says, it means, me being powerless, it means I made a decision to turn my will and my life, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, the way I'm acting, how I'm feeling, all of that, what I want, what I wish for, what I dream for, what I think is right, what I think is fair, what I think is reasonable, what I think ought to happen, what I think the right way to do it is, and if there's any kind of a God out there, what I think this God ought to do. Well, so then all this changes in this step, and I go, no. All that stuff that I just said, I'm going to bundle it all up, and I'm going to bring it to the throne of God, and I'm going to go, look, God, I don't know what to do with this. Like here, I'm going to lay this down in front of you, and you take it. And it's like, man, okay, so you got it down there. You're down there in front of God. You're in front of the altar of God. You got all your life down there. You got all your problems down there. You got all the stuff that's going on down there. You got your children down there. You got all this stuff, your job, your marriage, all that. You got it all down in front of God. The problem is, your freaking hands are still all over that package. They're on there because you're just waiting for the split second where God tells you what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. And based on what God's going to say, you're going to decide that this is acceptable or it's unacceptable. And if it's unacceptable, you're pulling the package back. The thing about that is, God, in that case, is still the contractor, right, in every way. God is a contractor because you and I are not willing to give up our will. I love how they put that first. Our will and our lives to him based on how we understand him. We're only willing to do that if we get the result we want. Like if someone said to you, man, in this program of recovery, we will, which is why we stopped saying this, we will guarantee you that we are going to be able to give you your life back the way it was. We really didn't help anybody by coming up with that phrase, I do not think, like get your life back. Because when Jesus takes a hold of a life, he just doesn't restore it back to the way it was. When Jesus gets a hold of a life, he makes it exponentially better, right? It is like going to be better. It's better than you ever would have imagined. It's like, no, I just don't need you to get my life back to the way it was. God's like, no, I'm not going to do just that. I'm going to do a lot more, like a whole lot more. That's what I'm going to do. That's the work that I do. That is the work that I do. That's why either you're willing to turn your will the way you want it, how you want it, the way you imagine it, the way you think it ought to be, what you think is right, your will and your life over to God, or you're not. That's where it comes in. Sooner or later, without that third step, which is why AA basically said, early on in the Oxford group stuff, they were like, yeah, these first 3 steps, we thought of those as being critical, and we really kind of thought that these were the only steps you needed. They said, pretty much we see the rest of the steps, 4 through 12, we see those as being an amplification of what is in the first 3 steps already. A further outline, a further explanation, all of that. But we believe that the critical path to recovery is in these first 3 steps. I would say to you, I really think the critical path to recovery, you got the first 2 steps of awareness of the diagnostics of my life, right? The diagnostics of my limitations. Those are diagnostic steps, but now the gospel step, the good news step, the power step, the freedom step, the radically different step is that step that says, gave up my life and my will. Because sooner or later, without these 3 steps, principally without that third step, life is going to become exactly what we saw in that video. It's basically going to become a house of cards. It's a matter of time before the one card falls and the domino caves in and all hell's breaking loose and it's Tuesday afternoon and somebody's left your marriage or whatever and you don't know what happened to your kids and you're like, how in the hell did it ever get this screwed up? How did it ever happen? How did it ever get this bad? How did it ever get this out of control? How did it ever get to this point? How? Well, the answer to the question, it's a ridiculously simple answer, but ridiculously difficult to accept. The answer to the question is, it got there because of what you could not and would not and maybe will not do, and that's turn your life and your will over to the care of God. And they don't even make you go, you have to have expertise with God. You turn your life and your will over to God, get this, as you understand God right now, tonight. Maybe you don't understand God very well. Okay, God's willing to allow for that. God's just going, you know what, just sit right here beside me. Sit right here. Let's talk for a while. Just sit down. Just sit down. Get off your feet. The thing is, that house of cards concept, for all of us in this room, I think whether we like it or whether we don't, and some of us like it a whole lot less, like right now, we really don't want to hear this. But I mean, sooner or later, your understanding of power and my understanding of power, it's going to fail us. Which takes me to this question that we start off with tonight. Like, I know I love God, but do I really trust God? I know that I love God, but since life's not working out the way I think it should, does God really love me tonight? Because it sure looks like, while I'm sitting here, God is failing me right, left, and sideways. And is God's love for me reciprocal? I love God, but does he love me? Is God's love for me, this is another big question, is God's love for me conditional or unconditional? If it's conditional, we're in a world of hurt, man, because like we aren't going to be able to pull this off. Like, we can't pull off being good enough people. We can't pull off being good enough people to earn our way into a loving relationship with God. I don't really think we can do it. I don't think we can do that. God's never asking for that. Is his love for me conditional? Is it like, really, well, I mean, God loves me if God's willing to do this for me, if God will reward me with good things, if it's like the cause and it's like, that is like the cause and effect religion you hear right, left, and sideways all over the place. If you are good to God, God will be good to you. If you do good things for God, God will do good things for you. It is basically a rewards-based system, and there is not one thing about that that is biblical. There isn't one thing about that that is biblical. There's no if then, there's none of that. So is loving God really the same as trusting God? Well, the thing is, if I'm walking around this earth and I really don't have a straight, honest, open relationship with Jesus, where I talk to Jesus freely, where I'm open with him about my feelings, I'm open with him about how I believe maybe he's even failed me. If I don't have that, I'm always going to be kind of emotionally, spiritually, even mentally on the run. Never really sure what God's going to do. Never really sure how God's going to do it. But the thing is, I'm not really believing, not really accepting the fact that God in every way has my best interests at heart. What is the demonstrated evidence that God has tonight my best interests at heart? That cross right there. That's the evidence. God so loved the world that he gave us his only son, Jesus, who died on a cross for us. The evidence is Jesus saying stuff like this. In Philippians chapter 2, it kind of goes, well, here's how Jesus lives. Figure this into the steps. Jesus taking on the form of a servant. Again, with the fullness of God in him, and the awareness of the fullness of God in him, Jesus taking on the form of a servant does what? Empties himself. In order to love us tonight, Jesus has already done all of that. Emptied himself, laid himself out there, laid himself out on a cross, laid himself on a cross, naked. That kind of vulnerability, what would it take for that to be us? Like, you're like, man, I would never do that. And you're like, you're right, you wouldn't. You're right, I wouldn't. But he would, and he did. And he rose from the dead, and it's happening, and he's here. He's here with those battle wounds, those scars in his hands. He's here tonight to be with you. He's here tonight to take that hand and hold your hand. He's here tonight to say, don't quit. Don't ever quit. When you think you're going to quit, squeeze my hand tighter and I will walk with you more. I'll sit with you all night if I need to. You don't have to be afraid again. You don't have to be alone again. You don't have to feel like a failure again. You don't have to feel like you're a loser again. You don't have to feel like you're failing your kids. You don't have to feel like you're failing yourself. You don't have to feel like you're failing your marriage. There's hope, there's hope, there's hope. The hope is in me. I'm here to give it to you. I'm here to give it to you. See, like, there is, I think, a big difference in loving God, because I've been there, man. Loving God and not trusting God. Because, like, do I believe that God might be unreliable? Well, I mean, I've been in situations where I loved God, but I did not really want the possible outcomes that God was going to give me. I wanted my outcomes. I wasn't willing to accept his outcomes. I didn't think his outcomes were reasonable. I did not think his outcomes made sense. I didn't agree with his outcomes. And I did everything possible not to let those outcomes happen, truth be known. Until I got to this day where I realized, man, this thing about powerlessness goes way farther than feeling like a failure. This thing about powerlessness, like it takes your breath away. It takes your breath away. This thing about giving up your willpower takes your breath away. And the first breath that comes into your lungs is not your own. It's Jesus basically breathing life back into you, breathing his breath back into you. That's what it is. You're like, man, that's hard. It's like, it is hard. You know, we generally want to shy away from messages like that in church because, like, we want people to come back. We don't want to talk about, you're coming here to this church, and I mean, like, we're getting ready for a crucifixion, and guess what? Your name is on it. And everything about you's got to die. You ready? Come back next Sunday. Like here, we can talk about it. I think it's good, but, you know, it's hard to do in a typical church on a typical Sunday morning, right? It's hard to do. But that's really what's going on. When you're feeling breathless, Jesus is breathing life into you. Here's a question for me. How do I trust God if and when I fully believe that God has failed me? How do I do that? Like for me, it was razor thin what was going to happen. Like, I definitely loved God, but there was a long stretch where I just really, absolutely resented God, resented his decisions, resented the outcomes that were in front of me. I just did. And I was that close to going, you know, God, everything about you is pretty much unreliable. Everything about you is pretty much like unsafe. And like that right there, when you get to that point, you gotta know, warning, 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 Will Robinson, blah, 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 lights, all that. It's like, man, look at, the enemy is taking a seat at the head of the table, your table. It's happening tonight. You gotta understand what's going on, and you gotta not do this whole thing of going, excuse me, sir, like I wonder if you would like get up and sit somewhere else. You gotta take Jesus by the hand. You got to walk over to the table where the enemy is sitting, and Jesus is going to go, allow me, get up and get out. Get up and get out, and do it now. Like, it's not going to be on you, it's going to be on him. Jesus is up for that job, trust me. I've watched it happen. I've watched it happen. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Okay, we say. We can do that. We can admit that. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We say, okay. Made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand God. And then we go, this was me like, look at, I love you, God, but man, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because right there is where trust shows up, or the need for trust shows up. This right there is the litmus test. I mean, a litmus test kind of looks like this one. Like, for me, this is a good question. Is it actually harder, do you think? Is it actually harder, if we're honest, to trust God with our children than it is with ourselves? Whew. Is it actually harder to trust God with our children than it is with ourselves. I think loving God is easier to do than trusting God with what's going to happen next Tuesday, what's going to happen next Thursday, what's going to happen when I go to the doctor's office on Wednesday. What is she going to say? What is he going to say? Loving God is easier to do than trusting God with Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day. Because Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, man, look, it's about me. It's about me. And the thing is, when it comes to Tuesday and what's going to happen, I already know the end of this coming Tuesday that I want to see in place. I already know. I go down the path of, well, I mean, if God's going to deliver that to me, we're good. If God's not going to give me that, I don't know if we're good. I don't know what I'm going to do with God then. I know what next Tuesday ought to be. I know what ought to happen next. I know what I want. And see, I think the hardest point of this is, in the end, my desire for power really is my inability to trust God. I can love God, but do I trust God? And it takes me back to the equation we've been using for a while. Power equals control equals fear. Because the more I try to control the power that I have, the more fear I have that I'm going to lose it. And if I don't interrupt that equation and rewrite that equation, I'm going to be afraid probably the rest of my life. I don't want that for you. Jesus doesn't want that for you. There's a better way to do it. We'll talk about this more the next couple of weeks. So I'm just really glad you were here. Let's pray. Sweet Jesus, we thank you for this time, for what you're saying to us, what you're speaking to us, how you're loving us, the way you care for us, the way you move on our lives. In your sweet name, amen.